Okay, well, why don't we kick things off then? Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Bono, and I am the Assistant Dean for Career Development at the University of Denver Sturm College of Law right here on your campus. And it is wonderful to have 33 students signed in with us today. It's exciting that you would make time during a very busy and odd semester to learn a little bit about the legal profession. In a few moments, I'm going to say some words about our panel, all of whom are practicing attorneys, and in one case, a judge. All of them are volunteering their time tonight to speak to you about the legal profession, and I want to give a little bit more of a background on this group of people. Before I do, I wanted to give my colleague Kyle Inselman from Career and Professional Development a chance to just say a few words on his behalf.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So hello, everyone. If we haven't yet met, my name is Kyle Inselman. I'm a career advisor. I work with half of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences undergrads. And just looking at the attendee list, I recognize quite a few names here. So I'm really excited to see you all here. You also may have heard that starting in the summer, I'll be taking over for pre-law advising. So if you have previously met with April Osborne or heard about this event from her, I'll be taking over that from her. So definitely feel free to reach out to me if you have questions after this panel about pre-law and working on applying to law school. Some ways to get in touch, I'll put them in the chat. Career.du.edu is going to be the best bet to learn about all the things we're doing in career and professional development this quarter. Pretty much anything we usually offer, from resume reviews to interview help to grad and professional school preparation, we are offering that virtually. So most of our work is unchanged this quarter. One thing that I want to make sure all of you know how to do on this webinar is to get in touch with us with your questions, because it's a little different from the Zoom meetings that you may be using for class. So we have the same chat box. Make sure that you select all panelists and attendees if you want other students to see what you're typing in there. There is a Q&A box, so you can type questions in there, and the panelists will be able to choose which ones they are answering and let folks know, hey, we're going to answer this in a second. And if you would like to ask a question out loud, if you would like to be unmuted and be able to chat with the panel, you can click the raise hand button. So let's just make sure you all know where that is. So if you are if you see the raise hand button, go ahead and click that. Let's just see if it's showing up for everyone. Excellent. Looks like we got everyone who is on the computer, because we do have some phone calls listening into, and you probably don't have that button. All right. And there we go, all of them lowered. And we may also do some other call outs like that as we go. So Eric, I'm going to turn it back over to you so you can get going with the introductions.
You bet. And for all the students listening in tonight, do feel free, as Kyle said, to send us questions via the chat, the Q&A box, or the raise hand feature. Kyle, maybe if you wouldn't mind being the spotter on the raise hand feature, and feel free to just jump in at any time if you have a question. We want this to be a dialogue as best we can on Zoom. The way this will work is I have a number of questions lined up for our panelists. They'll talk about them, but again, if you have questions, feel free to jump in. A little bit about the group of attorneys who are with us today. This is the legal dream team led by Judge Adam Espinosa from Denver County Court. This is a group of people who are not only terrific attorneys in the Denver community, but they are also very committed to increasing the diversity and inclusion of the legal profession. The legal profession is working hard to improve in that area. The legal profession understands that in order to effectively represent their clients. The legal profession needs to look like a cross-section of our country. And so the Dream Team folks are all very committed. We also have a law student with us, Cybelle Floyd. She goes to our law school here at the University of Denver. You may have seen her around campus. And she's going to share a little bit about what it's like to be a law student throughout the course of this discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Judge Espinosa because I'd like him to talk a little bit about the Dream Team concept in more depth. And then what we'll do is a round of introductions with all of our panelists. Judge Espinosa?
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody, for coming on the call, and our presenters for being willing to join us on this webinar. I'm very excited to be here. I can tell you that diversity and inclusivity is something that our courts and our legal profession are very focused on. We all know that having a more diverse legal profession and judicial branch will lead to better decisions. And that's really the result of the work that we're trying to engage in here. It's going to lead to better and more confidence by the community and our courts and our third branch of government. So I joined the Dream Team a few years ago at the request of Judge Wiley Daniel. He was our first African-American federal district court judge here in the state of Colorado. And he and I went to lunch with Arash, who was kind enough to introduce me to him. And he asked me if I would be interested in taking over his Dream Team, which focuses on trying to address some of these pipeline issues that we have here in our community and in the legal profession. And whether or not I'd be interested in speaking to students and young people about our profession and try to encourage them and show them a path how to join the legal profession or perhaps even be a judge. You know, when I grew up, I didn't know a lawyer. I didn't know a judge. I thought the only law there was really was criminal law, just because of the information that I'd seen in my community, the things that I've seen or witnessed. So if it wasn't for people helping me along, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am. And so I'm very proud and honored to have been asked by Judge Daniel to take over this program. And I'm very honored to be here with this group of very talented lawyers. I see their faces on the Zoom webinar, and I'm very excited to see all of you. Each of them has wonderful stories, excellent credentials, and I'm hoping that they get to share them with all of you during this presentation. Eric, I don't want to talk too much. Thank you for organizing this show, and Kyle, thank you for having us. We're very happy to be here.
I was muted. Thank you, Judge Espinosa. With that introduction, I want to give each of our panelists an opportunity to talk a little bit about who they are, what they do as a lawyer, where they work, and just a little bit about the steps that they took to get there. And on my screen in the upper left-hand corner, I see Arash Jahanian. So we'll start with Arash.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Judge Espinosa, for leading this Dream Team. Thank you, Kyle, for having us. My title is Director of Policy and Civil Rights Litigation at the Meyer Law Office. It's a firm that focuses on immigration defense, criminal defense, and a kind of burgeoning civil rights practice that I'm leading now. And I do kind of immigrants' rights policy, but also on the civil rights side, I will do anything from excessive force cases by police to wage theft cases, employment discrimination. So I've got a very fun and varied job. Before this, I spent 2.5 years at the ACLU of Colorado as a staff attorney. Prior to that, I was at a civil rights firm in Denver called Rathod Mohammed Bai. I was there for about 4.5 years. And I also have worked for a big law firm on the defense side in DC. And I did what's called a clerkship, where you work for a judge. And that judge was actually Judge Daniel, who Judge Espinosa mentioned, who had been running this Dream Team for several years. And I had the honor of knowing very closely. We're actually at about the one year anniversary of his kind of sudden and unexpected passing, which was felt throughout this community and this state. as he was truly a trailblazer and cared deeply about getting folks excited about the law, increasing diversity and inclusion in our profession, which is really a big issue. And it's something that we really can't put forth enough effort towards. So I'm excited to see so many of you joining us for this meeting, and happy to answer any questions you have and hopefully give some insight into our profession.
So I think the big question for Arash, is there anything that you haven't done in the legal profession? Had quite a storied career already.
You are too kind.
All right, next we'll go with Mark. Mark? I think you're on mute, Mark.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Clouatre. I work at a law firm based out of South Carolina. I run the Denver office. It's called Nelson Mullins. I was with a large Denver firm for 17 years, and prior to that, I was with an international firm out of Houston, Texas, for about 4 years. I'm a Denver native, and I ended up going out of state for law school in Texas, but moved back when I could. It's great that there's so much interest in law school. It's a fantastic experience, frankly, because there's so many things you can do with it. You don't need to do what Arash and Amber and Sonia and I do. There's the array of things that you can do. I do commercial litigation, typically on the defense side, which means that usually just companies are fighting other companies for some contractual problem or some financial issue. And so we try to sort that out through the courts. But we look forward to a vigorous discussion. Thanks.
Mark, it's great to have you with us. Thank you. Next, I see Sonia Anderson. Sonia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Ramirez Anderson. I am the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, and my mom was family's also from Mexico. And I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and went to college in a smallish city in San Antonio. And then I took a few years off and worked at a law firm. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college and to go to law school. So I wanted to get a behind the scenes look at what lawyers really do. And I worked at a big firm there in Dallas and really enjoyed the intellectual challenge that I saw that the attorneys were experiencing. So I went to law school at University of Colorado, and I got an internship while I was in law school with my current firm, Hush Blackwell. And I have been with Hush Blackwell this is my 4th year, and I practice employment law, which means that I represent companies, employers, when they get sued for alleged discrimination. So I'm on the opposite side of Arash most of the time. And I also train them on how not to discriminate against people. So it's a lot of fun.
Sonia, it's so good to have you with us. Thank you for that introduction. Next, I see Amber.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Amber Gonzales, and Sonia and I were actually classmates at the University of Colorado, and today marks 4 years from the day that we graduated. We were actually reminiscing about that earlier this morning. It was a very rainy day on May 7th, 2016, so I'm glad the sun is out today. Very similar, though, I'm at a larger firm. I'm an associate at Armstrong Teasdale in my 4th year, and my path to get there was kind of untraditional in a lot of ways. Like Sonia, I'm a first-generation college student, and if you are anything like I was in undergrad, I had no idea how to make this idea of law school happen. So one of the reasons that the Dream Team is important to me and mentorship of all sorts is important to me is because I was one of those students who had a dream that some days felt kind of unachievable to me. I did not have strong mentorship in my life. Nobody in my family had gone to college before me. The only people that I knew who had ever been to college were basically my teachers and doctors. I didn't have a personal relationship with anyone who had a career like the one that I was seeking. So it's really important to me that people like us get out into the community, can answer your questions, help students understand how achievable this goal is. It takes a lot of dedication, that's no lie, but it's definitely something that's within your grasp if you're interested and you're willing to stick with it. So I'm super happy to be here. As Mark mentioned, he said he does complex litigation. I do something very similar on those lines. I also do complex litigation. Basically, how I would explain it is most of my clients are businesses that are being sued. And so I help them defend against lawsuits the majority of the time. Usually they're larger businesses that involve a lot of kind of complex issues, but I'm very drawn to this particular practice because of the intellectual rigor. There's always some sort of novel new question to be answered, and I genuinely do learn something new every day, and I do love it.
Amber, thank you for those remarks. It's going to be great to hear more from you. Next, I see Justin Cruz. Justin.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks again for inviting me to be on this panel for the second year in a row. And Judge Espinosa, thank you for inviting me to be part of this group. And Kyle, thanks for setting this all up. So I'm Justin Cruz. I'm an intellectual property attorney at Michael Best and Friedrich. What is intellectual property? That's patents, copyrights, trademarks. So inventions, people's inventions, their creative works, and help protecting people's brands. My path to get here was, I would say, unconventional in the sense that I graduated 2008, 2009. So everything that's going on right now with the economy and what's going on with law firms is very reminiscent in many ways. But I think there's been some changes in what the market has been doing because of what happened in 2008 and 2009. But, the bottom line is I had to hustle to get where I'm at, and I think that's something that is going to be even more important now. And I think with my colleagues here on this panel, I think there's a sort of a bookend, and I think there's going to be some good discussion on what people have seen based on their experiences in these timeframes. And in terms of before law school, I didn't decide to go into the legal profession until later in my college career. So it's something that is good to think about early on. I have a technical background. I didn't want to be a doctor, a medical doctor, or a lab rat for my career. So that's when I decided to go to law school. But that late decision in and of itself had some interesting timing things when considering law schools. And I'm happy to elaborate on those as the panel discussion goes forward tonight.
Justin, thank you. And in your remarks about 2008, 2009, that time frame, those are really telling. The students on the call would have been relatively young back then, but that was a time when the economy crashed because of a variety of financial issues going on in our country, and it was a hard time to get a job if you were coming out of college or as a lawyer. And so Justin mentioned that he had to hustle, and you have to hustle at any time as a lawyer, but certainly when you're in tough economic times, it can be a very challenging thing, just as it is in just about any industry. So, next I see Cybelle Floyd. Cybelle is a law student at the Sturm College of Law here at DU, and she's taking time away from studying for finals to be with us tonight. So special thanks to Cybelle. Cybelle, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, so thank you for having me. I am a third-year student at DU, so I'm graduating in a few days after finals. So kind of similar to what's been said, I was actually born in Mexico, and then I moved to Denver when I was about 2 years old, so I grew up here. And I also took an untraditional route. I worked for a few years doing financial services at JP Morgan after undergrad at CU. And then I actually started at DU in the evening program. So I worked full time my first year and a half and then went to classes at night. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about just how, kind of what Amber was saying, just I had no real reference on how to get into law school, what to do to even apply, and just kind of that whole process, figuring it all out without having necessarily like mentors or people in your family or, you know, circle to help you through that.
Cybelle, thank you, and best of luck on your finals, and congrats on your upcoming graduation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Judge Espinosa, did you want to say any more before we get into the rest of the discussion?
Why don't we go ahead and get started with questions, and I'll just fill in my story a little bit as we talk.
Perfect. Sounds good. So first question for the panel, and you all can sort of jump in any order. And if no one jumps in, I'll start calling on people. What does a typical day look like in your work life? Whether you're a student, a judge, or a lawyer, just talk a little bit about what you do every day.
I can start. So I can talk about what I did today. And today, my day started off with emailing my two of my clients who are in-house counsel. One's at a bank, and the other is at an oil and gas company. And so I am in charge of drafting a motion for summary judgment. So what that means is the plaintiff, we've taken her deposition, and she's alleged that the bank fired her because she's a woman and because she's over 40 years old. And we say, the client says, no, we didn't fire you because of that. We fired you because you took confidential client information in your personal vehicle after we told you not to do that, because she was moving offices. And so we instructed her to use the company movers to protect the confidentiality of those client documents. And so now that I've talked to the plaintiff, we've gone through what's called discovery, we've exchanged documents to prove each of our cases up. I'm drafting a motion to the court to say they don't have sufficient evidence to bring a claim against our client. And so I am working with my client and talking to these other lawyers to talk about revisions and what kind of arguments they think need to be added, any facts that need to be added. And what I find particularly interesting about my area of law is in the process of finding out what happened, I get to really be an investigator and talk to all kinds of people about, so, you know, what was this person's demeanor like? What was she like in the office? And just really kind of get the backstory. And it shows that the relationship between your coworkers is really important, because there's some people who I run across, not in this case, in different cases, that say, oh no, that person was great, I'm not quite sure why they fired her, or let me tell you, this person was awful. I can't believe they didn't let them go 4 years ago. So it's just a very interesting area of law. And then after that, I had a couple of meetings. I am a part of the National Employment Law Council, and so through that I talked with other diverse attorneys, employment attorneys, and so I had a couple of meetings with them, and then I also coordinate with some of the partners that I support or that I work with, and talk about our action plans for different cases. And so it's a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and a lot of communicating with other people.
Hi, this is Mark. One thing that I would add is a typical day, there is no such thing. If there is, I would say a typical day is an atypical day. One fascinating and exhilarating thing about the law that I find is that no day is like the next. And while that's terrifying and scary, it's also gets me up in the morning and gets me looking forward to going to work. I think you'll find lots of colleagues, whether they're stuck in a job that they don't care for. Typically the complaint is it's just the same thing over and over again, and the law certainly is not that. So it's always evolving, it's always moving, and the facts are always different. So that is one fantastic thing about being a lawyer.
I just want to piggyback on Mark's comment, if I can, Eric. Mark made a good point. The law every day is different, and every legal issue that you see is different. What we're doing in the courts right now is we're trying to figure out how we can ensure everybody's access to our courts and that their legal issues can be heard, including these summary judgment issues that were mentioned by the other lawyers, and trying to make sure that we can continue the function of our court during COVID. As you know, many of the courts have gone down to reduced operations, so a lot of my day in the last month has been trying to develop technological ways or ideas and creative ways to continue to be able to serve our community. As a judge, I've been a public servant my whole career. I started off as a prosecutor at a district attorney's office, and then I moved on to the Supreme Court doing attorney regulation matters. And then I came to the Denver County Court, and I've been on for 5 years, first serving in the civil division and then the criminal division, and now back in the civil division. So for me, I get to really do all kinds of different areas of law. I get to meet so many fantastic lawyers, and I get to work with people in my community. And to me, that is what I get up every day, I get to meet people, I get to help them with their difficult legal issues. And it really makes me feel like I'm part of the community and that we're doing something positive for our community. Right now, though, we're doing virtual hearings, a lot like we're doing right now. And I've had a couple emergency hearings where I sat here in my basement, a lot like I'm doing now, except for I had my robe on, which is really kind of weird. And we had a hearing, and I had the parties exchange their exhibits electronically. I could see them on the video call that we have, just like we did now, and we were able to get a result for these people who had a very, very serious emergency where if the court didn't step in and take an action, somebody could be hurt. So that's a little bit about my current situation.
Thank you, Judge.
If I can go next, I want to answer this question, Eric, in conjunction with one of the questions from our attendees. The question was, in your jobs, do you typically work alone or with other lawyers? So I think the answer to that is always both, which some of the other panelists have alluded to, but I will be the first to admit that if you sat outside my office and watched me all day long, you would not find my job to be very glamorous or interesting looking from outside my door. Most of my day, I sit by myself in my office looking at my computer screen. Or now that I'm home, I sit at my desk looking at my computer screen. As some of the other panelists mentioned, I do take calls or have meetings, but most of my day is spent involved in legal questions that I'm researching and writing about by myself. I naturally am a pretty extroverted person, and this actually doesn't really bother me because when I get involved in an intellectually challenging legal question, I can spend hours hunting down the answer to that. And then I have the opportunity to share that information with other people, whether that's through an email or a phone call, or under normal circumstances, walking down the hall to somebody else's office. So I think that regardless of your natural personality type, you're able to find both a lot of quiet time and a lot of opportunities for interaction.
Thanks, Andy. Anyone else have more to add?
Yeah, and today was actually a very interesting day, and to echo the points made about a typical day just being a wide swath of potential tasks. Today was one of those days where I was also focusing on the counselor of law aspect, where I reached out to clients, and it was mainly just to check in, make sure that the clients were okay in this situation, and what things look like for them, both from a business perspective moving forward. That was outside of my area of law, just to check in and making sure that they were okay. And then my day switched to being more of a scientist and reading through some technical documents provided by my client and asking him about questions. I'm working on a patent litigation case related to pesticides. So I was going through, and my chemistry is very rusty at this time, but got to play a little bit of chemist today. And then some of the unglamorous stuff about being a lawyer, but it's not all this way, where I did the dreaded document review, and we had a bunch of documents and discovery that Sonia alluded to. And part of what I had to do was just read a bunch of emails from the other side and see what was going on and trying to develop the facts of this case, being an investigator, as Sonia mentioned. So it was quite the day where the different roles expected of an attorney just sort of happened to be on my to-do list, where I was not only doing one task and just parked in front of my computer, which oftentimes you are, but was able to just reach out to clients and make sure that they were doing okay.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in on that one before we move on?
Justin, we're all parked in front of our computers all the time now, aren't we? But I real quick, because I think a lot of you aren't hearing a lot about going to court, which I think is a good, except Judge Espinosa's in court all the time under normal circumstances. But I think one thing to acknowledge is that even for folks who choose litigation as opposed to other types of law, like writing contracts and making deals, and part of my job, which is policy, where I spend more time at the Capitol and dealing with folks like the governor's office, there are a couple like criminal lawyers, like family lawyers, who are in court a lot. And a lot of us who litigate are really doing more with papers and outside of court and research and writing, and maybe taking depositions and that kind of thing. I also realized I've had a heck of a day, which started out with my colleague doing an oral argument over the phone, of course, in our conference room with the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which I helped him prepare for on an immigration issue. And then I investigated a couple potential cases where one guy got very badly beat up by a local police department, and seeing if he had a case. And then another one who he and his wife and sister-in-law worked for a cleaning company that basically didn't pay them thousands of dollars for work they did, and then threatened to call immigration when they said something about it. So that's kind of my world. One of the questions was, do you work with other lawyers? And Amber answered that. I think it partially depends on your style. I tend to bounce off ideas off other people all the time. So, I think there were many circumstances where folks in our office were in and out of each other's offices. And then other lawyers tried really like the intellectual piece of it and work alone and try to figure things out for themselves. So I'll stop there so we can get to some other questions.
Arash, thank you. That was a great perspective. What I'm going to do, I think I had a script of questions lined up for this, but the questions coming in on the Q&A and the chat are better than the script that I came up with. So I'm going to throw out the script. Hopefully the panelists are all seeing the questions, and not if you are. I'm going to start going through those. Before we do, though, I just want to give Cybelle a chance to just talk about a day in the life of a law student, and then we're going to dive into the questions from the audience.
Okay, so well, right now, I mean, my day is just really working on reading through my outlines and just kind of studying that way, doing Zoom calls with other people in class just to kind of work through different practice problems. And but when class is in session, I spend a lot of time obviously in class taking notes and then preparing my outline and just kind of studying as I go along. I'm also the president of the Latino Law Student Association, so that takes up a lot of my time in terms of just different types of meetings and different initiatives. And then I have some mentees that are first-year students, so just kind of taking time to talk to them. And so it's a busy life.
Great, thanks, Cybelle. Yeah, I thought it was important for the students to hear your perspective. Let's get into some of the questions that our students are asking. There are several questions around sort of preparing for law school, and maybe we'll start with those. I'll ask a mashup of those questions, and then I'll invite the panel to respond in any way that they'd like. one student wonders what kinds of tips we have for choosing a law school. For example, should we choose schools where we want to practice, or should we be looking at T14 schools, or are they all the same? And then other students are wondering what skills do they need to be in the legal profession? What does the timeline for applying to law school look like? So those kinds of questions. Who would like to weigh in from the panel?
On the just on the law school question, I think I have a quick answer, which is like, if you go to a top 14 school, I do think you have flexibility to go wherever you want in the country, and then there are law schools that do have strong programs in certain areas if you know them. But there's also an advantage if you know you want to be in a particular place like Colorado to going to DU or CU, which are both excellent law schools and where you can form connections have externships at places you might want to work. So if you know where you want to be, I think there can be an advantage to going to a school in that location. But certainly a top 14 school can serve you well if you're more inclined. And then a huge thing is money, of course, because law school education is so expensive.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple of quick things. It's been a long time since I went to law school. I've been a lawyer for 18 years now. But I can tell you that one thing that is important is the relationships that you build during law school. When we see Sonia here and Amber here, you can tell they've built a relationship that is not going to end at the end of law school or after year 4 or even after year 10. The people you meet in law school are going to be people that encourage you, promote you, that mentor you, and that are going to be your biggest fans as you come through the practice and the profession. And so Arash said something about if you know where you want to practice, if you wanted to practice in Denver, consider DU and CU. And I think there's a lot of truth to that statement, because you'll start to develop those connections right here in Denver with people in our community that ultimately you'll be working with side by side, maybe as a public defender and a prosecutor, maybe as a defense or a plaintiff's lawyer, or perhaps you'll clerk for judges that are down the hall from each other. And so I think those are things that really take into consideration. I started law school in Kansas and came out here my last year, and I can tell you it was an uphill battle trying to find a community and trying to find people to give me an opportunity. In fact, my first job I basically got because I kept calling the judge, and his clerk said, hire the guy so he'll stop calling. And so the judge ended up hiring me as his law clerk. And I don't know how much of that is true. It's kind of funny sounding, but I think that my path getting into the legal profession here was a bit different than it would have been had I started at DU or CU. So those are my thoughts.
Great. Do others want to weigh in?
I actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, like, you just have to look at the things that are important to you. So for me, like, DU has a really good experiential clinics where you're able to actually work as a student lawyer while you're in school and just kind of get that experience. And then for me, the part-time program was really important. So I think it's just more about looking at a school that has qualities that are important to you, or experiences that are important to you.
So I definitely agree with everything that's been said so far, but I will say law school is getting into law school, and getting into law school of your choice is a very competitive process. And then depending on what you want to do after that, it can also be very competitive. For example, I mentioned I work for a larger law firm. In the Denver area, most firms are only hiring 1 or 2 interns a year, which then develop into your full-time job after law school. And because it is a competitive process, depending on what you want to end up doing, I think that there are important things to consider there. The way that I took 6 years off, not off, I was working, but I took 6 years between undergrad and law school. And I had a colleague who was the same undergrad class as I was, but who went to law school earlier than I did, to a T14 school. And in kind of picking his brain after he graduated, something that he told me that kind of stuck with me was that he felt like he was kind of in the lower rung of people who qualified for the school that he went to. And so he always felt like he was kind of trying to prove himself amongst that group. And he felt like it was sometimes beneficial to be, so to speak, a big fish in a small pond. If you are looking at being in the top of your class because that's really important to getting internship opportunities and things like that, I do think that it is important to consider setting yourself up for that kind of success at a place where you're going to have access and doors open, but also going to be more likely to find some academic success as well, because things like ranking do become important, and it's not glamorous, but it is taken heavily into consideration for certain types of opportunities.
Great. We're also getting questions about, did any of you take a gap year between undergrad and law school? Do you think that's a good idea? I imagine there are different answers among the panelists on that one.
Well, I took 6.
I took some time, and I worked in a lab, actually. I knew I wanted to get into law school, and this actually sort of relates to another question about the timing and applying for law school, where, you know, I didn't take the LSAT until a little bit later. You want to take the LSAT, I believe, your junior year, and Eric, you might be able to add some detail to that. But I took a couple years off. I think it was personally beneficial for me to do so. There was, you could see there was a gap in people who had taken time off versus people who went straight through. And I think it's one of those things, especially now. I think the decision to go to law school, as Arash mentioned, it is expensive, and it's something that you should do purposefully. And so if you need that time off to actually think about that, and it might change the timing when you want to take things, take tests and prep courses. But I would say going into law school isn't something that you want to do just because you don't know what to do next. There's a lot of people in my class here that went to law school because they didn't know what to do next, because we spend 22, 23 years of our life going to school. Well, you know, maybe not the first 4 years, but, you know, so, but then they ended up in a position where the job market was tough. They spent 3 years and over $100,000, and you graduate into something that, you know, the jobs are tough to come by. So if that year is, I don't see any problem. I don't think it sets you back taking time off before going to law school.
Can I just quickly echo 100% what Justin said? I took 2 years off and think I was way better for it.
Did
I
anybody
took 1 year off.
Did anybody go straight through from undergrad?
This is Mark. I did, and it was primarily a financial decision because there was financial aid offered to me. So I think there's just a huge variable set of factors that will present to you, and some are jobs, some are financial, some are I'm burned out from undergrad and I need a break. And I think it's a real personal, individual decision.
Yes, and having worked in law schools for 14 years now, I can tell you that I've seen people succeed, whether they've gone straight through or taken a gap year, or in some cases, many gap years. You can definitely succeed in any direction. So, you know, that's something to talk to Kyle about in terms of what's going on in your own life and what might make sense for you. And if you want to look me up at the law school, I'll put my email in the chat. I'm always happy to answer those questions as well. Here's a really good question that just came in, and I'm skipping around because there are probably more questions than we'll have time to get to tonight. But this is a really good question. Have you ever felt out of place in law school due to your socioeconomic status? And if so, how did you manage that?
I can start if that's okay.
Yeah, that'd be great, Cybelle.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of, I think that DU and CU both do a good job of, they've increased diversity quite a bit, but I think that obviously there's still a lot more to do. And so you do find a lot of times that, there are people in classes that their parents and grandparents are lawyers, and they just kind of have people in their circle that they can bounce ideas off of and talk to about things. And so there is, like, I didn't even know what an outline was until almost finals my first semester. And so there is a lot of that. And I don't know if you necessarily overcome it, but you just kind of build a circle of people, whether that be professors or friends that you make throughout law school, and you kind of build that support circle of people that you can go to, and you kind of get through it that way. That's what I found for me. So.
Thanks, Cybelle. That's great. Do any of the rest of you want to chime in on that one? Amber.
So, first of all, an outline. Cybelle, you've mentioned outlines twice. An outline basically is what law school students create to prepare for finals, because unlike most undergrad tests, you can actually take in materials that you have prepared, like an outline, that help you do the test. But more directly to the question, I did not feel that so much in law school. I felt it very, very deeply in undergrad. So I went to a small private liberal arts school in the Boston area for undergrad, and I went to school with people who were extremely wealthy, whose parents had no problem writing a check for tuition to the tune of $45,000 a year in the early 2000s without batting an eye. And that was something that I was not prepared for. I didn't realize how deeply that would impact me. I was actually just telling someone this story about a week ago, that my freshman year, I was 18 years old, and I made friends with a girl who was extremely wealthy, and we were going to go to dinner or something, and I went to her room, and she's throwing things out of her closet left and right, looking for her Louis Vuitton purse. And my first thought at 18 years old was, I didn't know teenagers could have Louis Vuitton purses. I thought that was like older grown women business. I did not even think about a teenager having like a $2,000 handbag. And it really just kind of rocked my world to be in a place where norms were so different from what I was used to. And the thing that really always got me through is, I know that I earned my place there. No one is accepted to a competitive university or law school or job or anything else out of charity. You deserve to be there. You have absolutely earned your seat. And anyone who believes otherwise probably feels a little bit insecure about their own place and their own qualifications more so than you. I never let the fact that other people perhaps came from money deter me from the fact that I very much deserve to be there. I was there first and foremost for an education. Friends came secondary, and that was kind of a benefit on top of the fact that I was there to get an education, prepare myself for the workforce, and I always put that first.
It's a great perspective. Thank you, Amber.
Yeah, and I think that's why programs like this and initiatives like this is important, going to the the pipeline and the diversity question, is because it is something. It can be tougher. I'm the first lawyer in my family, and you do see it. If you see people who are quote unquote legacy, third generation, fourth generation, And it's just one of those things where, one, participating in events like this, I think is helpful to build that awareness, along with creating events and initiatives like this. And that's one of my motivations to try and provide my perspective as well, is because it is something where, again, I'm a first generation attorney, didn't really have anyone to show me what I'm supposed to do. I didn't have those resources. So being able to meet other people and hopefully build those resources for people who might be in your same situation, I think is very important.
Yeah, and let me just chime in very quickly. I think I'm on now. I'll just volunteer myself and all the Dream Teamers that if you want to reach out to us after this presentation, if you feel like in terms of applying to law school or when you're in law school or whatever it might be, you can always reach out to us. And that's why we're doing these kinds of presentations, because in part, perhaps some of us had those experiences in law school and undergraduate, or we had experiences like I can tell you about mine. My mother kept telling me to go to college. Well, she had never been to college. My father never even finished high school. And so, I got to college and I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I just knew I was there. I kind of thought that was what I had to do. And it took me some while, some stumbles here and there, but having a network like us, all of the lawyers here and judges that want to help you, that's going to help you when you start to feel these kinds of pressures or concerns. You need to reach out to us. That's why we're here today. And Eric has our email addresses, and he can give those out to the group if they want it.
That's right. And I've put my email in the chat. It's ebono, E-B-O-N-O, @law.du.edu. So if you have questions for me or any of the panelists, I can get a hold of them. So feel free to funnel your questions through me. I think we have time for maybe one more set of questions because I want to be respectful of people's time here tonight. And we're not going to be able to get through everything, and I apologize for that. The audience has been terrific with questions, but there have been a series of questions around what students can do to build their resumes for law school. And so if any of you have tips on that, beyond just grades and the LSAT, what else can they be doing? And also, related to that, one of the questions had to do with building the resume for law school in light of the fact that summer internships are being canceled left and right. So what can they do in place of that to become competitive for law school?
I'll go ahead and start. I think the biggest thing that you can do is have a diverse background. And I would really focus on activities that help other people or that try to solve other people's problems, because frankly, that's what lawyers do every day. And when I talk with a law student and interview them for a job, I always ask, why did you select that activity? And what about the problems of that particular organization attracted you to it? So I would encourage you, my two things are you can help others and solve their issues.
Great, thank you, Mark. Other resume builders for law school, any suggestions?
Let me just chime in very quickly. I can tell you that this issue with a lot of summer clerkships and internships being canceled is being addressed. I can tell you that our court is looking for interns. I'm currently actually interviewing interns that had other job opportunities at law firms. So because of the economy and the public health crisis, those positions are no longer available. And so I've had folks from the Pledge to Diversity program reach out to me, and I've interviewed 6 people. And I'm going to offer them unpaid, because I can't offer paid in my court, but unpaid internships with my court, and an opportunity for them to be with a judge and to learn from a judge and to kind of see what we do, so you can really understand if this is something you want to do, and if this is the area of law you'd like to practice in or pursue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eric, maybe this is a good question for you to address as our representative from the law school.
I knew you'd put me on the spot. Happy to take a stab at it. While I'm not on the admissions committee at the law school, I do know a fair bit about what law schools look for in candidates. And I have done admissions at the undergrad level years and years ago, so I understand how that works. The great thing about law school is there is no single major that law schools are looking for. You can have any major and be competitive for law school. What are they looking at? Yes, they're going to be looking at the academic rigor that you took in college, but most college classes are challenging. They're going to be looking at your desire to be there. They're going to be reading your admissions essay and scrutinizing that. So as you've probably picked up from the panel, one of the many things that lawyers do is write. And most lawyers would agree that they are professional writers. So one of the best things you can do in undergrad is take courses that force you to write a lot. The more you write, the better prepared you'll be for learning to do legal writing, which is a slightly different style than what you'll be doing now. But you know, at the end of the day, it's just putting good sentences together. And so if you've got a strong writing foundation and your essay comes across really powerfully in your application, that can be helpful. Law schools are looking for people who genuinely want to be there. So being able to articulate not necessarily exactly what you want to do with your law degree. Nobody expects you to have figured that out, but just the passion that brings you to the law. What is it? Who do you want to serve? Who do you want to help? Why do you want to do this? That can be very helpful to you. In terms of what you can be doing to build your resumes, either through internships or if internships are, you know, going away for you, unfortunately, because of COVID, you know, really just buckling down on your studies. I think one of the things that I would be doing if I were in undergrad is trying to connect with people like our panelists, not just through this panel, but following up with them, emailing them, asking them if they're open to a phone call or a Zoom meeting with you, just so you can pick their brains a little bit and get deeper into the weeds about what you can do to set yourself apart, what kinds of internships you might pursue in undergrad once those start kicking in again, what kind of classes you might choose in law school, et cetera. So I know if I had law school to do over again, I would have talked to a lot more lawyers before I went, because I would have had a lot better sense of what the end result was going to look like had I done that. Okay? Any other thoughts on getting into law school? Making yourself competitive? Okay. Well, I think we were set to go to about 7 tonight, and it looks like we're there. What I would propose to the panel is, I know we weren't able to get to all of the terrific questions that the students asked. I have copied them, and what I would propose is distributing the questions to you that we didn't get to, and if any of the panelists have a couple of minutes to just write out a quick answer, I can compile those and push them out through Kyle. Kyle, would that work for you? Panelists, there's no expectation that you answer every question, but if you feel moved to, you know, spend a few minutes answering some of the questions, I think collectively we could get all of the questions asked. Does that sound like good follow-up?
Does.
All right. Well, I'm going to just take a moment to make sure I did get all the questions. I think I did, and I'll follow up. I do wish that we were in a place where we could give our panel a round of applause. I'm really grateful for their time after work hours in their homes But I'm also grateful to the students for showing up when there are so many other things going on in the world today. And so I want to thank everyone for participating